No. Wrong. Media exaggeration. Overall, just wrong. Hi everyone. I'm sure you have all heard all kinds of stuff in the media about what's really happening with the NAR settlement. Well, what you're hearing in the media isn't typically what's happening with the NAR settlement. So I'm going to go ahead and try to give you some real information to take the media exaggeration and the sky is falling out of the whole thing. In case you don't know me, I'm Jay Rose. I'm the Director of Education at NAR. We've been doing this about 5 years, and I think we're able to give you some information that you're just not going to get in real life. Let's look at some history of this has come up to, and I'm going to go back a little ways. The MLS technically started in 1960s, okay? But that's not what you see on the computer. The way you would take a buyer and find houses is you would drive around until you would see a sign in the yard, and then you would go ask about it, okay? Eventually, how many of you remember the telephone books? They weren't really telephone books, but they were the size of telephone books, and you'd open them up and there'd be 9 houses per page arranged by county and township and price, and that's how you search for houses. What you didn't realize, or might not have known, is everyone at that time was a subagent of the seller. Nobody represented the buyers, and that caused a severe problem. Okay, in 1990-ish, we established buyer agency agreements. We established representing buyers instead of being subagents of the sellers. That was a great thing. It was still misunderstood, but at least now buyers actually had a representative. Okay, let's leave the 1990s. We're now in about 2010. We had lots of inventory, lots of short sales, lots of foreclosures. Everyone was doing everything. 2012, 2013, 2014, the market cooled off. There weren't nearly as many listings, so let's be nice and say that the brokers got creative on how they were going to market their homes. They would do coming soons. They would only advertise to their offices. They were doing all kinds of things that really didn't help the buyer or the seller. Okay. The biggest problem was they weren't really using the MLS the way they should. They would try to keep houses off the MLS. All right, let's move to 2019, 2020. The policy was developed in 2019, but it went into effect January 1, 2020, the Clear Cooperation Policy. Okay, what that said is that brokers had to put everything in the MLS. They had to do it within 1 business day of any form of advertising that property publicly, whether they put it on a personal website, whether they called friends and told them about it, whether they put it on social media. Anytime they publicly advertised the property, they had 1 business day to put it in the MLS. And they were required to say somewhere in that MLS that they were going to pay a buyer agent. The problem with that is sellers couldn't do what they really wanted with their properties potentially. They used to be they would have their listing agent only market to their office and to their sphere. They wouldn't really put it out on the MLS. Why would they do that? For privacy reasons. They didn't want all the showings. They just wanted a nice, small, concise progress to get this done. Okay. A lawsuit in Missouri basically said sellers shouldn't be forced to do anything with their property they don't want to. They should be able to market their home the way they want to. What this all came down to was a lawsuit that led to a $5 billion judgment saying that the sellers were being forced to use the MLS. They couldn't advertise it the way they wanted it to. And also that there was basically price fixing going on. the amount of commission was being set by this policy. From that point on, everybody in the world, copycat lawsuits came up. That has really been what has led to the problem that we have today. Now we've heard about the NAR settlement. Okay, there are so many requirements in the NAR settlement. I can't go into all of them today. We'd be here forever. But the two biggest changes that are coming from this settlement are, first of all, you can have no reference to compensation in the MLS anymore. Okay. Second is buyer agents must get a buyer agency agreement signed by their client before they can show one house. Okay, the media has jumped to a crazy conclusion. They have said that all of this is going to either keep buyer agents from getting paid at all, reducing buyer agents' commissions, doing all kinds of stuff to the buyer agents. That's not necessarily true. Frankly, I don't think it's true at all. I don't think there's going to be a big change once we get used to doing it this way. With the settlement, what does matter is how the buyer agent is going to get paid. Are they going to get paid still from the seller? Are they going to get paid directly from the buyer? Are they going to get paid a per service fee? Is there going to be some combination of all of this stuff? We have no clue, but the buyer agents are still going to get paid. Now, let's go back to what I said before. You can't say anything about compensation in the MLS. That's absolutely true. You can't say what a buyer agency commission is. As a matter of fact, the buyer agency commission field in the MLS is going away. Now you're going to say concessions. But even in the concessions, you can't state that you're going to pay a buyer agent commission. But I'm wondering if you could say in your concessions, seller will pay up to 6% for closing costs, loan origination fees, and any other fees of the buyer. And that doesn't say anything about compensation, but says something about compensation. How does the part about this settlement that the buyer agent has to have a buyer agency agreement with their client? I think it really helps us a lot. First of all, how many of you have ever worked with a buyer for ages and then had them go buy a FSBO or have them say, oh, my cousin just got his license and he's going to help me out? It's so frustrating, but now you're required to have that buyer agency agreement. So it is going to say how you are going to get paid. If anything, the settlement is going to make it easier for buyer agents. It used to be that 95% of the folks in the industry were not using a buyer agency agreement. Okay, some of it was the buyer wouldn't want to sign it, they didn't want to go after it, all kinds of stuff, so that you weren't getting it signed. Now that the requirement is you have to have a buyer agency agreement signed, you can say to your buyer, hey, you got to sign this. There's nothing that you can do except signing this because I can't show you a single house until you do. All right, I've said it several times. The media is making doom and gloom out of this. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. Okay. First of all, everything I've talked about has to be approved by the court. Now, on April 23rd, there was a preliminary approval. Yay. Okay, that's great. But the final formal approval isn't until November of this year. Okay, isn't that great? Except we have to have everything in place by mid-July. They don't even give us a date. They just say mid-July this has to go into effect. Even though it's not formally approved, we have to act as if it is. Okay, once you understand the history of the MLS, you think about it a little more, it kind of makes sense why we need to be where we are now. The new requirements may actually even help the buyer broker. The most important takeaway is everything changes. Rules change, laws change, everything changes, and we have adapted over the years and we will continue to adapt now. I appreciate that you spent some time with me to learn a little bit more about this. I'm Jay Rose from iGrid.